Just before Christmas, the U.S. National Archives released more than 13,000 documents relating to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. No big bombshell revelations are expected there, but many of those who've investigated this for years are more concerned about the 5,000 documents that the Biden administration did not release. Why, nearly 60 years later, is information still kept hidden? Well, joining us is veteran television anchor and president of the Save America's Freedom Foundation, Mike Hambrick. Mr. Hambrick is author of the fictional thriller Memphis. Rock DJ uncovers conspiracy behind MLK Jr. assassination. So, Mike, it's good to talk with you. Why isn't the Biden administration releasing all the JFK assassination files?
My opinion is because it's the control of information a socialist government usually tries to impose, and there's certain information that the government does not want us to be aware of. And I think it's because there was a government conspiracy behind the assassination of JFK, as was there a government conspiracy involved in the assassination of MLK as well in 1968 on April 4th. It's a government conspiracy they don't want us to know about.
Well, you've done some research on both of these, but back to JFK, who do you think was responsible, and do you believe it was a soft coup d'etat?
I think it was the military-industrial complex that was involved in that. There were 4 assassinations, as you know, Gary, in the 60s: JFK, Malcolm X, MLK, and Robert Kennedy, and they all had several things in common. They were great orators. They could move public opinion. They were internationally known figures, and they all opposed the Vietnam War. And it's the old adage of follow the money. The industrial military complex did not want that war to end. Too much money was being made by it, and those that stood in the way of that or threatened that flow of money to the military-industrial complex were just simply done away with. That's what our government, I believe, did and was responsible for, and that's why these unclassified documents are not being released. They don't want us to know the particulars of that, and they're hoping that the next news cycle will move on past that and people will forget it, and it won't be a big deal until the next time it rolls around. Pushing the can forward is the idea.
Well, here we are in 2023, and more Americans now believe there's an unelected government, a deep state of bureaucrats, along with members, as you mentioned, of the defense and intelligence communities, who actually control the government and direct policy. Now, here's a warning about that from President Eisenhower in his farewell address delivered to the nation on January 17th, 1961.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Your thoughts on Eisenhower's warning about the deep state and now the politicization of the FBI 60 years later?
Well, I think President Eisenhower was very prophetic. We are and have been threatened by the power of the military-industrial complex, the deep state. But I think it's all part of a larger problem, Gary. I think that we have been involved since the early 1900s in this country in a socialist revolution. Not your typical European socialist revolution that was bloody and took control and nationalized businesses and all of that. It is a slow but patient and methodical revolution that has been carried out by some very committed, smart, capable people. And it's an intellectual, political, spiritual, and cultural revolution. We have lost that battle. A counter-revolution is now necessary.
And you talk about Martin Luther King Jr. You wrote a fictional account of his assassination. Is truth stranger than fiction? What do you believe actually happened there? And are there MLK Jr. assassination files that still need to be released to the public? What's the truth?
I believe that there are files that still need to be released. And the assassination, the conspiracy, Gary, brought together a disparate group of people who ordinarily would not have been in concert on anything with each other. And it ranges from the FBI, the CIA, military intelligence, the Dixie Mafia, the KKK, the corrupt, racist local government in Memphis and members of the Memphis Police Department, and Carlos Marcello's mob out of New Orleans. They were all brought together for one single purpose, and that was the assassination of Martin Luther King. And they were successful in doing that. And I believe that James Earl Ray was set up as a patsy. He was not the man who pulled the trigger. He was not involved in it at all in that regard. He was a patsy and was utilized and set up a year in advance of the assassination on April 4th, 1968.
You and I are old enough to remember the results after his assassination. There were riots. So did they want a race war?
No, I don't think that. Well, there were, as I say, disparate groups were brought together. There were people who were racist who wanted to get rid of Martin Luther King because of his power and influence in the civil rights movement. But there were also those in the government and the military-industrial complex that went as high as, I believe, actually Lyndon Johnson, but certainly J. Edgar Hoover, who had been monitoring King since the 1950s and had labeled him as the single most dangerous member of the black race in America, and he labeled him as a communist. So they all had different reasons for wanting King to die, but they all came together over the single purpose of getting that done. The other reason that the establishment, Hoover and Washington, wanted King dead was that he had also planned, a month after he was assassinated, there was a planned march on Washington where he was bringing together 500,000 people, estimated to be, on the Mall in Washington to set up a tent city to protest. It was the Poor People's March to protest all the money that was being spent on the war in Vietnam by the government and taking away money from social programs that impacted minorities in America. That was another reason that King was killed as well, because the establishment in Washington could not stand the idea of 500,000 people camped on the Mall in Washington indefinitely. That was just not acceptable.
Okay, Mike Hambrick, thank you for sharing your time and insights with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Gary. I appreciate it. Thank you.